This is Start, Grow, Manage, where we help managed service providers achieve the impact, freedom, and wealth you imagined back when you started your company. At Start, Grow, Manage, our tools, practices, and processes help you engage, energize, and execute on building a business that empowers an extraordinary life. Learn more about our programs and how they can fuel your fire at startgrowmanage.com/learn more. Let's go.
Today, we're going to talk about one of the subjects that you just despise.
Oh, I hate it. I can't stand talking about it. Ugh.
So the biggest problem with Joe is getting him to not sell stuff, which I bought lots of stuff from Joe. So I know I finally just had to partner with Joe and say, no, I want him to be on my side. I can't afford to keep having these meetings with Joe. But Joe is a talented salesperson, great at the sales conversation. But it is also great to hear how other people are really helping others learn the sales conversation. So we're going to chat with Jennifer Bleam later today. And she started numerous multi-million-dollar divisions and businesses. And it's interesting, she has gotten them to the point where they've grown, and then she does it again, right? She enjoys the growing of it, like the creating.
And that's the fun part. That's why we do what we do now, because we enjoy the growing of it.
We're working with people who are growing. And if it stays static, it gets boring. So anyway, she's got a great story. All these businesses that she started, best-selling author on Amazon, award-winning speaker, and she really coaches people through the sales process. Two things came up for me. And one of them is the absolute critical importance of knowing who you're selling to and the problem that they have. We can't escape this topic. It comes back to us all the time, is how critical it is to understand whom you're selling to.
But I like what you said, because the logic of it is inescapable. Like, you just can't get away from it. And you have to keep coming back to this issue. And if you don't know the problem you're solving for whom, you got to stop doing what you're doing and figure that out first. It is key. It will get you to double, quadruple, quintuple your sales in a very short period of time. So I know we keep beating the same drum, but we ain't going to stop.
Well, we keep getting it beaten into us. It's like everywhere you go, it's that. And then the other thing that came up is listening. She's just got some beautiful stories around how salespeople do not listen. And they manage to talk themselves out of a sale. And it's like I always say, I'm easy to sell to, because I'll tell you exactly what my pain is. You just have to tell me if you solve it. And yet it's still hard to buy. And you have to wonder how many people are just leaving money on the table, like the future growth of their business on the table, simply because they're not listening in the sales conversation.
But that goes back to the same thing. If you don't solve a problem for a specific person, it's very hard to listen, because you don't know what their issues are. So you can't hear them. When you know the problem that you solve and for whom, you can hear when they have that problem, even when they're not problem aware. You can hear it. But the problem is that if you're just agnostic and you're just going out and you're just selling your thing and it's all about you, you can't hear what anybody else is saying. So you don't hear their issues and their problems when they speak. You try to put them into your box and give it back to them, and they're like, that's not what I'm saying. So it turns into an argument rather than a sales conversation. And what I love about Jennifer is that she shows you how to take that and turn it into a real sales conversation.
Right. And she's got some brilliant advice there. And she ends with a beautiful nugget. I'm not going to spoil the surprise, but she summed up like the way to think about building your business in about 10 words, in a way that there's no way for me to improve on it or Joe to improve on it. So she just absolutely beautifully said it. So we'll let her do the talking. And on that, I think we'll move over to chat with Jennifer Bleam. What do you think, Joe?
All right, let's do it. So meet my partner, Jeff Loehr. He's absolutely amazing. Jeff, meet Jennifer. She's just awesome.
Hi, Jennifer. Lovely to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. This is going to be a really great conversation. I can tell already.
I hope so. It'll be a good conversation. Absolutely. I love your content too. I love how practical and useful you make everything. It's wonderful.
Thank you. I'm trying to be as consistent as Joe. I think my phone pops up with a notification from him almost every day, maybe every day. So good stuff. And Jeff, I don't know a whole lot about your background. Have you been in this world for a while?
I do not come from the MSP world at all, actually. I come from a business background, and I've built businesses in different structures, from startups. I've run an angel investment group and involved a lot of startups, all the way through to multi-billion-dollar projects in South Africa. My real claim to fame is just communication, influence, being able to tell the story that gets people to take action, and just having a lot of experience with building businesses. So that's where I come from. And then Joe's Mr. MSP expert. We put the MSP together with business, and there we go.
I love it. Very cool.
Basically, what Jeff was able to do is I explained how I build my MSP, and he built the process around it to be able to do it repeatedly, consistently, over and over again. And he's just brilliant at what he does. And he says he doesn't have MSP background, but back in the 90s, he was managing server migrations.
That's right. I did, actually. We didn't call it an MSP back then. We just called it a guy doing tech stuff for a company. And I did that for a number of years, actually. That was good fun, but then moved on and found myself in the corporate world, and then came back. So cool. Tell us a little bit about you and what you do, Jennifer.
So I've got a really crazy last 6 or 7 years. My husband has an MSP, and I was homeschooling my kids, and the husband needed help with billing and filing and just the day-to-day stuff. And then the kids got a little bit older, and I said, I've done sales and marketing before. You remember that, right? Like pre-kids. Yeah. And so I started helping him with sales and marketing. And then Robin Robbins at Technology Marketing Toolkit saw what I was doing and said, you need to come work for me. I don't think you need to keep working for your husband. You need to do bigger things. And so I went and worked for her for a couple of years and helped her get her Done For You newsletter, a print, what does she call it? Accelerators Club membership off the ground. And then it started being not fun anymore. Both cut from the same cloth, and it's her business. And so she wanted people to sell her way. I don't sell her. Yeah. It's just not my personality. Nothing wrong with it. It's just not how I like to sell. And it stopped being fun. And I don't go in halfway. So if I'm going to work 50 or 60 hours a week, it needs to be rewarding and it needs to be fun. So at the point that it wasn't, I started looking for my next role. And there was a startup cybersecurity vendor that was selling SentinelOne back when ransomware was a big thing and there was no great solution for it. And so we were doing SentinelOne plus a US-based SOC and selling a whole lot of it. So I think I came in as employee number 3, and I was the VP of business development. And we did the beautiful hockey stick growth curve. And 17 months later, we had a $4 million run rate, and which is a lot of selling because the tool at the time was $4 per endpoint. A lot of selling. A lot of partner enablement, a lot of sales training, and we were then acquired by Continuum. And I stayed for about 6 or 8 months until they wanted me to move to Pittsburgh. And I went, nope, not interested. It's not even like Pittsburgh. It's like the armpit of Pittsburgh. It's awful.
I thought Pittsburgh was the armpit.
Oh, no, Pittsburgh is very nice. We have nothing against Pittsburgh.
This is like if you drive through, it's like an old oil town, and it's all strip malls that no development has happened in years, and everything's dilapidated and falling down, and new businesses pop up, and then 4 months later they're gone. I think Continuum was the only success story that town has had in decades. That's really when I exited and said, okay, new chapter, clean slate. What am I going to do? And Continuum let me keep all of my sales training IP and all of my relationships and everything. And there were no real non-competes in place. And so that's when I started my consulting company about 3 years ago. And I have just recently shifted from one-on-one over to a small group. And it is sales, marketing, a little bit of business. I don't position it that way in the marketplace, but that we do a little bit of vivid vision and things like that, because we've got to know where you're going or we're going to get to the wrong place. Really.
Yeah, it's always the problem. It's really hard to advise somebody on how to get there if you don't have any idea where you're going.
I'm really surprised by the number of businesses that they've been open for 10, 15, 20 years, and they don't know what they want. They don't know if they want a lifestyle business. They don't know if they want to be a rapid growth company that gets acquired in a few years. And they go with whatever the latest coach or the loudest mouth tells them, and they try to attach to that dream, but it's not theirs. And so there's no gasoline behind it.
There's no energy behind it. And so you just end up doing work the whole time.
Yes. And then you work yourself to death. It's miserable.
And you end up working yourself to death. And it is funny. Like, we find that all the time. We work with people all the time. They just don't know where they're going. And they're very stuck in just doing work and doing stuff. And you talk about the importance of putting a process into your sales. And it's just so often that people don't treat these things as something that have a process.
Yeah,
but they do have a process on the tech side, like that part of their brain. They've got great process.
Sometimes they don't.
Sometimes they don't.
It is true. I had a
So-
client and I said, what do you mean you don't have an onboarding process for new clients? Like, you've been in business for 15 years, you have 30 clients, you want 60, but he had shared that was why he wasn't doing marketing and wasn't closing sales, is because there was this fear, I'm going to have to onboard them and I don't know how to do that. And literally I said, have you been on Chat GPT? It's your friend. Let me show you. And inside of 3 minutes, we had a 80% solid onboarding process. And he's like, holy cow, I didn't know you could do that. So you're right. Sometimes they don't even have those processes.
What's interesting is onboarding is one that people also put off a lot. Like, they really put off having an onboarding process. And it's so interesting because you go through all of the effort to do marketing and sales, and you close the sale, and then you shoot yourself in the foot by not having the process to bring people on board. Like, all of the good work you've done to lay the foundation, and then you just drop the ball. And we've always said, great onboarding process. Then people are going to forgive mistakes later. But if you have a terrible onboarding process, then you are always stuck.
Yeah.
Yes. And mine is very manual right now. Like, it's a good process, but it is all manual. And so that is on the priority list to get it automated, because it can't be manual. It can't scale with a manual onboarding process.
Yeah. We're big advocates of onboarding processes that break as little as possible and make it as smooth and friendly as possible. It's more about the conversation than it is almost about the technology. You want to get your basic tools on. You want to break as little as possible. You want to understand the environment the most. And then you do all the migrations and all the stuff as projects later, because then the client has a great onboarding experience.
Interesting.
And they feel like you didn't break anything. If you do everything right up front, if you do all your mail migration, everything in the first 3 weeks, you're going to break so many things in the process that you're going to upset the client. So,
I think let's bring it back to sales and what Jennifer's here to talk about, because I think we can go on and on about the onboarding process, but actually I'd really like to learn from you a little bit more about your sales process. So why cybersecurity? Why not just general sales?
So it's interesting because a lot of people have a fair amount of muscle memory when it comes to selling managed services. It's a relatively known quantity. They've done it before 5 or 10 times, maybe 5 or 10 dozen times, and a relatively easy sale. I don't mean that in the sense of ease of completion or ease of success, but I just mean it's like getting on a bicycle. Like, I know what I'm doing. I know how this conversation is going to go. There's probably nothing that the prospect is going to throw at me that I've never heard before. I can prove ROI. Like, it's just comfortable. But cybersecurity is different because it's newer. There's no way to really prove ROI. In fact, if you're honest, you're going to have to say, no, I might cost you efficiency. If I put multi-factor authentication on all of your devices, all of your software,
going to slow you down.
It is going to slow you down, and it might be a little bit of a hiccup, and there might be a learning curve. And so if you're an honest salesperson, which those people do exist, then you can't sell cyber based on ROI. So then how do you sell it? And it's a different sale. And so that's why I wrote the book on cybersecurity sales, not just sales in general.
But don't you think that cybersecurity these days, is it really hard to sell cybersecurity these days? It feels like it's all over the place.
It's interesting. So there are still business owners that either have their head in the sand and believe it can't happen, or they aren't aware. They think it truly is the larger companies or the mom that lost her recipes and pictures over the weekend. And it's a line item, it's a budget line item that these companies have never had to spend money on before. Sometimes it isn't even ignorance necessarily. It is just the dollars and cents. I don't have twice that budget in order to put into cybersecurity. It's not so much that it's a hard sale, it's that the money just isn't there.
So how do you do it? How do you go from clueless, don't know that I need this, to happily writing a check so that I get my 2FA that's going to drive me crazy? Because I am of the crowd that is driven crazy by
He
this.
really is. He really
It's obnoxious.
I'd personally rather they can have my stuff.
You might not think that if it happened, though. So I know you said that tongue in cheek, but that's actually one of the keys to selling cybersecurity, is helping someone shift from, they can just have my data, or it wouldn't really impact me. I would somehow pick myself up and recover, and help you realize that no, it really could impact you. And so I like to say that there's two arguments that you need to make when you're talking about cybersecurity. And the first is impact. Impact, implications. How is this truly going to affect my business if this thing happens to me? And too often prospects are like teenagers. I'm invulnerable. And even if I had a head-on collision, I would somehow walk away from it. And so you need to have a very real conversation like, okay, I know you think you'd be fine, but you're an attorney. How would you know what cases to work on? How would you know when to show up to court? How would you track your time? Okay, great. You have legal pads because you're an attorney. Congratulations. But you're tracking it with a pen and paper. So now who's going to be the one to put it into the database and into your CRM once it comes up and you're running again in 2 weeks? And will there be a lack of integrity in terms of data? How much would that be? Are you going to lose 10% of your billable hours to bookkeeping mistakes? And those are very real implications. And it's almost a flavor of the reduced to the ridiculous sales methodology, where we've all seen buy this frying pan for less than $1 a day for the next year. And you're like, okay, so this frying pan is $365, but $1 a day feels really, really doable. So it's taking that concept and flipping it's on its head. And it's saying, Mr. Prospect, you think not having access to your data is this tiny little thing, but I'm telling you, it is death by 1,000 paper cuts, because you're just like, it's just data. And I'm like, no, this is your payroll, your ability to collect money, your ability to submit proposals. So you're helping them see that all of these 1,000 paper cuts really are a big deal.
It's also your client's data. I guess one of the things for me is we can rebuild our stuff and it'd be a pain in the neck, but if they got our client's data, and I think that's what people miss, is it's not just about us, it's about all of the names and passwords and credit cards and SOPs and all of that stuff that exists within our world that we have to protect. And I think for me, that's even more important than my stuff. I was with an accounting firm once where they lost $500,000 of a customer's money due to a phishing thing. And that's just one of those things where that is a terrible feeling, right? Like your own stuff, you feel stupid. When you lose your clients, that really gets at core.
There was a plastic surgery center that had a ransomware attack a couple of years ago, and the perpetrators actually said, if you don't pay the ransom, we're going to release all of the pictures and the data out to the dark web, or maybe even the regular web. I don't recall, but think how damaging that would be. Like, we've all seen kind of post-surgery pictures, and there's the bruising, and the pre-surgery pictures, you've got like all the Sharpie markers all over the face. And these were famous people, even if they weren't famous people. And so you're right, that's another level of impact on your company and on you personally. What about just emotional? Do you ever get over the fact that you cost a client $500,000? I don't know how you do that.
For just dollars a day, you could have prevented that.
Mitigate. I like to say mitigated.
Mitigate the risk. Yes. You can never be 100%. But when I was looking through your stuff, two things stood out to me. One of them was that you talk a lot about discovery, right? And understanding discovery. And then the other one was objections. But in your book, you've got this great quote. You said, after all, 90% of what you discover in sales calls these days is repetitious. The conversation with today's prospect will be exactly the same as every other company in the world. why do I need to do discovery?
So this is where we really throw sales on its head, because the way that discovery is typically taught is that there's this magic set of questions that when I ask these questions, I discover these things and magically I've just made a sale. And it really is this ethereal concept, and no one really ever brings it out. It's not down to earth at all. And I've been through probably a dozen classes where we fill up 3 whiteboards with really great discovery questions, but no one ever told me, why am I asking all of these questions? I now have 500 questions. How do I know which 15 to use? Because no one's going to answer 500 questions. We're not like the FBI where we're interrogating someone. The key to discovery is remembering that it's not about you. Discovery is to help the prospect discover how underserved they are. You're not going to discover much new at all. If you've gone on 50 sales calls, you might be surprised by 1 or 2 little minor things, but you are walking in with a whole lot of knowledge, and your prospect is in a completely different place. They think they're fine. They think there's some minor bumps that you're just going to put a Band-Aid on. And so, by the way, if they're thinking all you're going to do is put a Band-Aid on it, they're expecting your investment to be largely the same as what they're paying now, because it's not really that big of a problem. What you want to do is ask questions to help the prospect discover, oh, this problem I thought was this big is actually massive. Solution is massive, which means, oh no, maybe the investment is going to be massive as well. Then when you come in, your investment is not quite as massive as they were thinking. You've price anchored them. They're expecting it to be a whole lot more expensive. And that's how you make your $250 per seat, $300 per seat pricing look reasonable, because now they realize what a massive problem they had that they weren't aware of an hour ago. That's also how you're a thought leader and you add tremendous value inside of your sales conversations.
I think the idea of discovery being for the client is so important. So we talk a lot about having to know the problem before you talk to the prospect, before you go in, before you talk. That's why you have to know who your target market is. You have to know who your avatar is. You know their problem. You aren't figuring out their problem when you're sitting there. And I think a lot of people miss that. I love the idea. What you're doing is you're asking these questions in order to help them see and accentuate that problem so that now they understand why they need a solution.
And then that makes much easier, right? Because if you're looking at that whiteboard of 500 questions and you're like, well, if I ask this question, here's the answer they're going to give. If I ask that one, they're going to tell me this. Now it's almost a matrix moment where you can slow down time and pick out the very specific questions to get you the answers that you know what the answers are going to be.
Because you know what the answers are. It's like my dad always said, my dad, the lawyer, said, always ask questions that you know the answer to.
Don't ever ask a question if you don't know the answer.
If you don't know the answer, it's too scary to ask those questions. What were you going to say, Joe?
I was going to say that's why I always talk about this, is to stay narrow. The clearer you are who your avatar is, the more you understand their industry and their problems and their stuff, the more equipped you come in knowing the answers to those questions. And the more you know the answers to the questions, that you can ask questions that almost cut. Oh. And you're hitting them with these questions that really, like, how did you know that? How I knew that is I've worked with just your industry and I really understand the problems. I used to have a coach that said that the answer is in the question, and it really needs to be like that. It needs to pull, like when you say it, the answer is in the question. And it's great. It's great. I love that.
And I remember I was a prospect on a sales call once, and the salesperson asked me, hey, do you have I don't remember what it was, a process around this, or do you know this number? And at the same time as I'm saying, no, I don't, my CEO brain is saying, but I should. And so I literally wrote it down on my to-do list, and I didn't end up buying from the salesperson just because I didn't need the solution, but he had added value to my world because the answer was in the question. It's, hey, do you know what your profitability is per client? Whatever the data point was, is like, no, but I should. You know why that's important. And there's some qualification there as well. If someone's, no, but what difference does it make? Then maybe they're not the right client for you. So then there's some qualification that can happen as well.
I've got to say, in terms of the sales process, I also love your story about the door salesman. Hey, seriously, right? Like, just tell us quickly the door salesman story, because this is a situation that we've been in.
We needed a new front door. We had a front door that had glass in it, and a rock got kicked up, and so the glass was broken. They couldn't replace the glass. So we need a new front door. Here's how much we want to spend. I know approximately what color I want, and I want it to have glass, but I don't want the glass to be see-through because it makes me feel like I'm unprotected when I'm walking around in my house. And we want skylights, and we want them to match, and we want them to go floor to ceiling. Like I walked in a very educated buyer, which is where most people are now. They are very far into the buyer's journey. And the gentleman got there and he came into the house and brought in case after case of items. And I'm like, I want a burgundy door with glass. And I like this. You can't possibly have 75,000 options for, I just told you what I wanted. And so he's going through the whole dog and pony show, and we had scheduled it for an evening. And of course, you know, your husband has to be there because, okay, they're good salespeople. They want both decision makers in the room. And like they come in and we're not even finished cleaning up dinner. And long story short, I thought this would be about 45 minutes to an hour because I know exactly what I want. I know what my budget is. The end. This appointment ended up taking 3 hours. 3 hours. The amount of non-listening and having to repeat myself, and it was painful. We did something similar with our Venetian blinds in our kitchen. But yeah, the whole concept of listening in a sales call, we talk about how important it is. It's like 83% of people want to be listened to in a sales call, and only 24% of salespeople actually listen in a sales call. And so if you want to actually be different, simply listen. Don't just ask the questions and then, you know, okay, this is what I can like end my weekend getaway while you're yammering on. No, like you're supposed to be actively listening and tell me why that is, or I'm curious, why are you thinking that? Or help me understand, is that a deal breaker?
I'm pretty easy to sell to because I know what my sales pain is. You knew what color door you want. I might not know what color door I want, but I said, this is the pain that I feel. This is the thing that I need to get solved. And you know how many people won't even address that? Like they could say, oh, you're not my client. That's cool. Or they just go on to their spiel for the next 3 hours. I haven't had it take 3 hours, but 3 hours talking to me about stuff that has nothing to do with what I want. And anyway, we could have closed the sales in the first 10 minutes because either you've got it or you don't, right? But
Yes.
it is like this idea of listening and just paying attention and setting that first agreement, right? And setting the tone of the conversation, controlling the conversation. I think there's that match between controlling the conversation, having each part of the conversation be the logical next step, and listening at the same time. That sort of, there's some magic in that, I think. Maybe not in the questions, but in that.
Yes, but you're saying magic, which I totally agree with because it isn't done very often, sadly. But if we take a step back and we say, okay, they're going through their spiel, or I said the dog and pony show, we've all been through it. And it's horrible when we're the prospect. But that is their sales process. They truly believe that all of those pieces are crucial, when as a buyer, we're like, I don't really care that you have 73,000 Yelp reviews. I just don't want you to have one. So the dog and pony show is the sales process, and too much of it is fluff and not needed when you're purchasing a door or Venetian blinds or whatever. And so that's where, as an MSP, you need to look at your sales process and say, where is their fluff? Where are their weak links in my chain that I need to strengthen, or it's going to cost me sales. It's going to cost me.
It's so funny. I was working with an MSP on their sales process, and the way it went, this is what happens next. And then if they say this, shut up, take the check, and go to this step. And then if they don't say that, do this. And then if they say they want to pay you, shut up, take the check.
And you even said at some point, Jennifer, you said, nobody says, can I pay you now? What's funny is even when you do say, can I pay you now? Sometimes it's hard to get them to shut up and take your money.
Yeah. They
It's
keep
hard
talking.
for me to shut up. I was in a call, this was probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, and someone said, what's your investment? And I told them, and they said, wow. And Coach Jennifer in my own head is, shut up, don't say anything, don't say anything. And they're like, what was that again? And I repeated it. That was it. I just repeated it. I didn't ask a question. I just let them sit on it. And they're like, I expected it to be about twice as much. And I'm like, okay, the shut up coaching I give to myself.
Yeah, because the automatic reaction is, oh my God, I have to lower my price.
Yes. Or justify why it is what it is. Wow. Oh, let me explain why it could be a lot more of it. You can think of it like this, and that none of that would have been necessary. And
Yeah.
I listened. I just gave them the space to either think it through or talk it through or tell me where they were coming from. And instead they were like, okay, I'm in. Actually, they said, what's the catch? And then they said, I'm in. Had I tried to sell against that objection when it wasn't really an objection, I could have lost the deal.
We're our own worst enemy. We were on a sales call like that where we knew exactly what we wanted. We needed a website vendor. And the guy, like Jeff said, look, you're charging me too little because this is what I want. And this is what you're selling me. Like Jeff was saying, I don't care if it costs 10 times as much. This, and you're trying to sell me this. And the guy would just keep talking about this.
Yeah.
And so we ended up leaving the call.
Which again is fine. If he doesn't do this, that's fine. A little piece is valuable enough that I should hire you for that, but get that we're talking about a bigger piece. But that brings us back to objections. Like it says, we imagine the objection is the price is too high and then the price is too low. So what is your secret sauce for dealing with objections? And you have, by the way, like a whole webinar on your YouTube channel around handling objections, which people should really check out. We will put that in the notes because you've got some great tips there, but I'll let you, I guess, spoil some of the fun here.
No, that's fine, because it's probably the most stress-inducing part of a sales call. Like you're moseying along and you think everything's great, and then the prospect throws up an objection, and there is like almost this physiological response where you're like, I've lost the sale. Like I completely messed up because they're throwing up an objection in my face. I actually welcome objections, because if there are no objections, I get really uneasy because I know what's going to happen. They're going to say, it sounds really good. This really sounds like exactly what I need. You're right. I am woefully unprepared for a ransomware attack. And then I can almost predict what's going to happen. I just need to think about it. I just need to go talk to the board. I'm backing out as the prospect because I don't want to make a decision. I've really already made it. I just don't want to tell you. And so salespeople wimp out and don't ask for the sale. And they're like, that's great. Just think about it. Let me know when you're ready to move forward. And then there's no sale. An objection means that they're thinking, okay, Jeff, I know you said A is true, but I don't really agree with you. And I really trust you, but I'm not on the same page. Can you please help me see it your way? And so that means that Jeff has created that proverbial know and trust, and Jeff has bonding and rapport with them. And so when a prospect is willing to say, I have an objection, what they're saying is, help me see it your way. And so what they're doing is really asking for your help, which means you just did a great job. Again, your physiological response might be to be like, oh no, I've completely messed up. But if they didn't like you, they would just nod and say, sounds good, I'll talk to you next week. But they are actually showing trust in you by saying, I don't agree. That's a position of vulnerability for the prospect to say, I think you're wrong. And that makes everybody uncomfortable. But if they're willing to get uncomfortable, that means that you've proven you're a thought leader and you've proven that you're someone they can trust. I'd encourage you initially just shift your perspective. An objection is not bad. An objection is actually good. And the biggest thing is seek to understand, where are they coming from? What is it that they're feeling? Why do they feel this way? Have they always felt this way? And you're just having a conversation.
It's so interesting because when I'm selling, when I don't get objections, I get very concerned because my underlying concern is this person does not understand what I'm talking about. Because if they really understood the problem, they would have questions, and they would have the kinds of questions that would challenge me. They would have those kinds of questions so that I know that I'm engaged in a dialogue with them. You have to remember that sales is not a monologue. And that guy, your door salesman, he went in with his monologue and he did his whole monologue rather than have a dialogue. And dialogue requires listening, right? And then responding, and then listening, and then responding. And so when I'm not in a dialogue, in a sales conversation, I'm always concerned that I haven't done a good job of presenting the case of why you need the service or product. It's really good.
Yeah, it's funny you use the term welcome objections. So I've been doing some work with Dr. Robert Chaldini, the guy who wrote the book Influence, and he talks about that as well in the sales process. It's welcomed objections, and like he's getting everybody to think like an objection is an opportunity to influence. An objection is an opportunity to have a conversation, and I think that's really valuable. I also say for startups, when they come and they pitch, the worst ever, all of the startups, they always fear the Q&A because they're afraid that the Q&A means that they haven't said enough. But the worst thing in the world is when you give your pitch and nobody has any questions, because it's the same thing. It means nobody's interested. Nobody wants to know more.
I've seen people do that from stage as well. They're like, nobody has any questions. I've presented for 45 minutes and I answered every possible question there could be. I'm concerned, like maybe you all went to sleep while I was presenting for 45 minutes, because how can you not have any questions?
How can you not have questions? Good. So what's the last piece? What else do we need to keep in mind?
I believe everybody can be a salesperson. Now, everybody can't be a 90%, 100% close rate salesperson, but I believe everyone, if you can string some words together, everybody can learn how to sell, because we've all been selling our entire life, whether it's selling our mom on buying us a piece of bubble gum out of the bubble gum machine, even though dinner's in 2 hours, or selling our parents on having a birthday party for us, even though it's a really busy weekend. Like, we all are salespeople as children. And so that proves that we've got the skill set. If it's rusty, lean into it, get a coach, read some books, listen to podcasts. All of those are ways to hone your sales skills. And all sales is helping somebody get what you happen to be able to provide. And so there's nothing sleazy or slimy about it.
No, I like thinking of it as helping them make the decision to get their problem solved, because you really believe in what you're selling. It's not sleazy. You just have to make sure that they have the problem and that you can provide the solution. And if you've got that, then you're just helping them get their problem solved. I think is brilliant. So what's a good way for people to get started with you? I assume you've got a program. You're not just doing this out of the goodness of your heart. There must be some great way for somebody to engage you in what you do.
If I could do it out of the goodness of my heart, I would do it, though. I love what I do.
But there's mortgages and
yes, all the things. So the best thing to do is go out to my website, mspsalesrevolution.com, and you can download my sales process if you're looking for a shortcut to creating your own sales process. Tons of resources, tons of blog posts. That's the best place to engage. You can find information there on how I work with MSPs. It's literally a very short-term program, and you can learn everything you need to learn in 90 days to 6 months. And then if you decide to work with me to execute and hold you accountable, great. If not, I call that graduating. Like, to me, that's a good thing. If you've learned everything that you need to learn and Jennifer doesn't have anything else to teach you, then you should go with another coach. Now, the flip side of that is I'm always learning new things. I'm always iterating. I'm studying. And so I think I'll be able to add to your business for a very long time. But if I can't, you should take your business elsewhere.
There comes a time when that's also the natural progression of things. Sometimes you do need other ideas, and sometimes you need different voices, and that's fine. So I also recommend checking out your YouTube channel. So you've got some really great content there as well. So we'll put all of that stuff in the notes. And on that, Jennifer, any last piece of advice for MSSPs or anybody in the area who's trying to sell stuff?
So this is going to be very broad, but get comfortable leaning into discomfort. If you keep doing what you've always done, you will keep getting what you've always gotten. And if you're looking for that next rung on the ladder or that next gear, you have to do things that are uncomfortable, whether that's reading a new type of book or hiring a new coach or attending a different type of event or selling in a different way, whatever it is. If you're playing safe, then you're in this very stale box. And that is very possibly why you're looking at your growth trajectory and it's flat. Or
that is beautiful. I love that. So thank you very much, Jennifer. It's been a real pleasure to chat with you, and I've learned some great stuff. So I think our listeners will enjoy it. Joe, you want to end the show?
Certainly. For all of you out there, and for you, Jennifer, remember, that you are loved. See y'all next time.
Thanks for joining us, and a special thanks to our subscribers. Consider becoming one right now and tap into our insights and instincts to help drive your business vision and success. Remember, you didn't start your business to feel frustration. You started it for freedom. We can help you discover the impact, freedom, and wealth you always imagined. Learn more at startgrowmanage.com/learn more.